In every age of history, there are families whose names echo through time: kings, conquerors, revolutionaries. But then there are the others, the ones who never needed crowns or armies. The ones who built empires not from land, but from information, credit, and mathematics. Empires with no borders, no flags, and no kings, only influence. And among these shadow empires, none became more powerful, more whispered about, or more misunderstood than the Rothschild family. Today, their name sits at the crossroads of history and conspiracy, reality and myth. But the real story, the true, documented rise of this dynasty, is far more astonishing than the legends. So before we dive into the labyrinth of wealth, power, secrecy, and financial mastery, make sure you watch till the end, subscribe for deeper revelations, and leave your thoughts in the comments, because this episode will challenge what you thought you knew about global power. To understand how this family rose to become at one point the richest private dynasty in human history, we need to travel back to the late 1700s, to a tiny house in Frankfurt's Jewish ghetto, one of the poorest, most overcrowded districts in Europe. The street was called Judengasse, narrow, dirty, cramped, a place where Jewish families were forced to live under oppressive restrictions. No land ownership, no political rights, curfews, heavy taxes. Yet from this restricted, suffocating world emerged a boy whose mind would alter the financial architecture of Europe itself: Mayor Amschel Rothschild. Mayor wasn't born into privilege. His father was a humble merchant dealing in coins and small financial services. But something set Mayor apart, an almost supernatural memory. He could recall the face, name, and credit reputation of every person he ever met. He could look at a coin and instantly identify its mint, weight, origin, and real value. He studied old coins not as a hobby, but as data. Each coin carried a story, a political event, a financial shift. And Mayer understood early what few others realized: money is information. And information, handled correctly, is power. At only 12, Mayer's world shattered when both parents died, orphaned, penniless. And yet, instead of collapsing under poverty, he used the only thing he had: his mind. He apprenticed under a banking firm called Oppenheimer, where he absorbed the mechanics of international finance. Not just lending, but networks. Not just currency, but trust. Not just transactions, but relationships. These lessons would form the skeleton of the Rothschild power structure. When Mayer returned to Frankfurt, he opened a tiny coin dealership from his home. No office, no employees, no credibility yet. But he began cultivating something more valuable than capital: elite clients. Through painstaking patience, charm, and an almost mathematical precision in his work, he caught the attention of wealthy German princes. Most importantly, he secured a relationship with Prince William of Hesse, one of the richest men in Europe at the time. Not by luck, but by strategic mastery. Here's the fact most people never knew. Mayer gained the prince's trust not because he was rich, but because he was reliable. He provided rare coins, genuine historical artifacts, and flawless financial calculations. And in the financial world of the 18th century, where fraud and incompetence were common, a man whose numbers were always accurate was worth more than gold. But Mayer knew something even more powerful: trust scales. Once a prince trusts you, his allies trust you. Then their allies trust you. Then their armies trust you. And finally, their governments trust you. But Mayer had a problem. As a Jew, he was legally restricted from entering many parts of the financial system. So he built his own system: a private, family-based financial network. One that operated outside borders, outside monarchies, outside traditional institutions. Something no other family in Europe had. And here is where the Rothschild story leaves the realm of the ordinary and enters the unprecedented. Instead of building one bank, Mayer built 5. Not personally, but through his 5 sons. You've heard the phrase "the 5 arrows" in conspiracy videos, but here is the real historical truth. Mayer strategically trained each son, not just in business, but in diplomacy, languages, mathematics, and cultural etiquette, until they were the perfect financial weapons. Then he sent them to the 5 most important financial capitals of Europe. Amschel remained in Frankfurt, Salomon to Vienna, Nathan to London, Karl to Naples, and James to Paris. This wasn't luck. This wasn't randomness. This was the world's first private multinational banking network. a family-run intelligence, credit, and courier system that could move money, information, and political secrets faster than any government. Remember, this was before telephones, before the telegraph, before global communications. A message could take weeks to travel from one city to another, but not for the Rothschilds. They built a private courier network, widely documented as one of the fastest systems in Europe. Their couriers used dogs, horses, boats, whatever was necessary. The Rothschilds were known to receive news days before kings and governments. On more than one occasion, they had intelligence before the British cabinet, the French ministry, or the Austrian emperor. This information advantage, historically verified, became the engine of their empire. But the real turning point came in London, under the most ambitious and fearless of the five sons, Nathan Mayer Rothschild, a man whose financial genius would rewrite history. Within a few years, Nathan controlled so much British finance that the Bank of England depended on him. He became the credit line for governments, industries, and military operations. And then came one moment, the event that would catapult the Rothschild name into legend, the Napoleonic Wars. During the chaos of Napoleon's campaigns, governments desperately needed money. Armies needed funding. Supplies needed purchasing. Debts needed paying. War is expensive, and slow financing leads to defeat. The Rothschilds became the arteries pumping money through Europe's exhausted veins. Nathan organized a system to transfer funds across borders faster than any army could march. British soldiers in Portugal, Spain, and other fronts received payments in gold thanks to his operations. Historians confirm that without this Rothschild network, Britain would have struggled to sustain its war effort. But then came the moment that would define the dynasty forever, Waterloo. 1815. This is where myth and reality collide. The dramatic conspiracy videos claim that Nathan knew the result first and manipulated the stock market. The truth is different, but even more fascinating. Nathan did receive news before the British government because his private couriers outpaced official messengers. But there is no historical evidence that he single-handedly crashed the stock exchange that day. What did happen, confirmed by archivists, is that the Rothschild communication network allowed them to maneuver financially with incredible precision during the volatility of war. Their ability to manage risk, access insider networks, and move gold efficiently made them indispensable to governments. By the end of the Napoleonic era, the Rothschilds weren't just rich, they were the backbone of European finance. Not because they controlled governments, but because governments relied on them. The rise of their empire didn't come from conspiracy, it came from speed, accuracy, trust, and innovation in financial logistics. They mastered the mechanics of bonds, international credit, and currency arbitrage. They removed the delays that crippled empires. They outperformed monarchies at their own game. And perhaps the most astonishing part, rarely mentioned, is that Mayer Amschel left behind a family constitution, a secret, private document instructing the dynasty to marry within their circle, maintain secrecy, and preserve unified control of the family wealth. This was not a conspiracy. It was a legal, documented strategy designed to protect their empire. From a tiny ghetto house to controlling government bonds across Europe. From a coin dealer to a dynasty whose private wealth was unmatched for generations. This was not magic. This was not myth. This was strategy. Their empire of shadows wasn't built overnight. It was engineered, piece by piece, son by son, courier by courier, until it stretched from London to Vienna, from Paris to Naples, forming a web of influence the world had never seen. And this is only the beginning. As the dust of the Napoleonic Wars settled and Europe struggled to rebuild, a quiet transformation began, one not orchestrated in royal courts or war rooms, but in private offices where pens were sharper than swords. And at the center of this transformation stood the Rothschilds, not as monarchs, not as politicians, not as conquerors, but as the invisible architecture behind the new financial world. While nations licked their wounds, the Rothschilds had something far more valuable than territory: trust, liquidity, and speed, the elements every recovering empire desperately needed. By the 1820s, the five brothers were no longer rising bankers. They were the central nervous system of European finance. Governments borrowed from them. Railroads depended on them. Industries leaned on them. Their influence wasn't loud, it was structural. Like the skeleton of a building, unseen yet essential, they held countries together during economic turbulence. What people often misunderstand is that they didn't gain this power through manipulation or secret plots. Their power was built on the fact that they solved the biggest problem of the 19th century: how to move capital, information, and security faster than any state could. Here's the historical truth that shocked even many economists. At one point, the Rothschild family handled nearly half of all international bond transactions in Europe, not through domination, but through efficiency. Other bankers simply couldn't match their multinational system. Princes trusted them. Industrialists relied on them. Diplomats whispered with them. For the first time in history, a family, not a nation, had created a financial superhighway stretching across the continent. But what truly elevated the Rothschilds into the realm of legend wasn't their wealth, it was their discretion. Unlike monarchs who flaunted their power with palaces and armies, the Rothschilds controlled their influence through silence. Their offices were plain, their homes modest by aristocratic standards, their public presence minimal. They understood a dangerous truth: when your power is quiet, it lasts longer. Still, behind those quiet rooms, they were engineering the world. Consider this: after the fall of Napoleon, Europe was a chaotic jigsaw. Borders shifted, economies collapsed, nations owed astronomical war debts. And the Rothschilds stepped into this chaos like surgeons into a battlefield hospital. They stabilized currencies. They negotiated government loans. They structured financial rescue plans. In some cases, they prevented entire countries from collapsing. Their role wasn't about puppeting politics. It was about providing liquidity when no one else could. One of the most mind-blowing examples is their involvement in the British-French alliance against the Ottoman Empire during the Crimean War. Britain needed loans. France needed loans. Both governments turned to the same source, Rothschild capital. And this triggered something unprecedented. Two rival nations were indirectly bonded through a private family's financial structuring. Not by political negotiation, not by treaties, but by credit. This was the quiet superpower of the 19th century. Not armies, not ideologies, credit lines. And the Rothschilds wrote those lines. But to understand how they reached such extraordinary power, you must know about the innovation that turned them into titans: the invention of the modern, large-scale, international bond market. Before the Rothschilds, government borrowing was risky, inconsistent, and often corrupt. Many lenders went bankrupt funding unstable nations. But the Rothschilds changed the game. They deployed their 5-branch network like a financial machine. Paris evaluated political stability, Vienna assessed regional risks, London analyzed currency flows, Naples monitored southern trade routes. Frankfurt tracked gold sources and market liquidity. 5 cities. One brain. One family. No government in Europe had anything close to this structure. They also pioneered a practice that today is standard in global finance: bond underwriting. Instead of lending their own money for every project, they pooled capital from wealthy investors across Europe, guaranteed the bonds, and earned commissions. This innovation multiplied their influence while managing their risk. It allowed them to fund railways, canals, mines, and national treasuries without exposing themselves to catastrophic losses. But possibly the most impressive aspect of their system was their private communication network. Historians have confirmed that the Rothschild couriers delivered letters faster than most national postal services. They used their own ships for cross-channel correspondence. They trained agents to memorize sensitive information so nothing written could be intercepted. They built hidden rooms in their offices where secret correspondence could be read in safety. This information advantage translated directly into financial power. When revolutions broke out in the 1830s and 1840s, France, Italy, Austria, governments panicked. Markets crashed. But the Rothschilds? They already knew. Their agents were embedded in the nerve centers of Europe: customs houses, shipping ports, trading centers, and major banks. They sensed economic shifts before newspapers printed them. They knew which governments would fall, which currencies would crash, which industries would explode. To be clear, this wasn't political manipulation. It was intelligence gathering, the lifeblood of finance. And yet, even as their power grew, the biggest misconception is that they controlled governments. The truth is more subtle and more revealing. The Rothschilds didn't want to rule. They wanted stability. Because stability maximized bond profitability. A stable nation pays its debts. A collapsing nation defaults. This is why the Rothschilds frequently supported peaceful resolutions, diplomatic agreements, and political reforms, because chaos was bad for business. In fact, documents show they refused deals they believed would destabilize countries. They were capitalists, not puppet masters. Still, governments knew this. When the Rothschilds stopped buying your bonds, your nation was in trouble. Their approval didn't control policy, it influenced confidence. Confidence is the real currency of nations. Yet in the middle of all this influence, the Rothschilds maintained something extraordinary for their time: a strict policy of family secrecy and unity. Wills were private. Wealth was consolidated. Marriages often took place within the extended family to prevent dilution of capital. Sons were trained from childhood to read markets the way generals read battle maps. Daughters were educated in estate management and correspondence. No other banking dynasty had such a cohesive internal system. No other family understood that an empire built on money must be protected like an empire built on land. Their playbook even extended into global expansion. While Europe viewed Africa, Asia, and the Americas as colonial opportunities, the Rothschilds viewed them as markets. They financed mines in South Africa, railways in India, infrastructure in Brazil, resource operations in Australia. They weren't conquerors, they were facilitators. They followed global expansion without ordering it. They funded opportunity without wielding armies. But the real shock? Their power peaked not in royalty courts, but in boardrooms. By the mid-1800s, nations like England, France, and Austria depended on Rothschild capital for industrial growth. Railroads, the arteries of the Industrial Revolution, couldn't expand without their financing. Mines couldn't open. Ports couldn't function. Many of the world's early multinational corporations were structured through Rothschild-backed deals. And yet, despite this immense influence, the family never tried to centralize political control. They never sought nobility. They never demanded royal privileges. They stayed in the shadows, because shadows protect wealth better than thrones. Their empire wasn't the empire of kings. It was the empire of infrastructure, credit, diplomacy, logistics, and information. A quiet empire woven through the fabric of commerce, not carved into stone. By 1850, the Rothschilds were widely considered the richest private family in world history. Their fortune, when adjusted for today's value, would overshadow even the tech billionaires we obsess over today. But it wasn't just money that made them powerful. It was the precision, discipline, and inter-city coordination that made them unmatched. Governments changed overnight. Empires rose and fell. Revolutions exploded across borders. But the Rothschild network remained calm, stable, calculating. Their true genius lay in this simple truth: they built a system that could survive any political storm. And as the world transitioned toward the modern age of telegraphs, railways, and centralized banking, the Rothschilds stood ready to evolve again. But their rise came with enemies: rival banking families, politicians who feared private influence, nationalists who despised foreign capital, and eventually, new financial technologies and global conflicts that would challenge everything they built. Their empire was powerful, yes, but it was about to be tested in ways even the Five Arrows couldn't predict. By the late 19th century, the Rothschild dynasty stood on a mountain no other family in history had ever reached. They weren't kings, but kings borrowed from them. They weren't politicians, but politicians sought their approval. They weren't generals, but their financing decided which armies marched and which stayed home. But here's the twist that history textbooks never emphasize. Even the most powerful empires don't fall from a single blow. They fade, fracture, and dissolve quietly. And that, more than any conspiracy theory, explains the real story of the Rothschild decline. Not assassination, not global takeover, not shadow government, but the evolution of a world they themselves helped create. The first pressure came from a force none of the five brothers foresaw: the rise of national banking systems. When the Rothschild network was born, nations didn't have centralized banks capable of supporting massive industrial growth. They depended on private capital families like the Rothschilds. But as the Industrial Revolution exploded, governments realized they needed stronger institutional structures. The Bank of England expanded. The Banque de France centralized. The Prussian and Austrian systems modernized. America created the Federal Reserve. These national banks slowly took over the role the Rothschilds once played, stabilizing currencies, funding crises, and underwriting government loans. The rise of institutional finance didn't eliminate the Rothschilds, but it diluted their necessity. Governments would always prefer to borrow from themselves rather than from a private dynasty, no matter how trustworthy. But if institutions weakened them, the telegraph wounded them even more. Remember, the Rothschilds' secret weapon wasn't just money, it was information speed. But technology leveled that advantage. Governments could now communicate across continents within minutes. Market data spread instantly. Suddenly, the Rothschild courier network, once the fastest intelligence system in Europe, was obsolete. For the first time, their signature advantage disappeared. Still, the dynasty wasn't done. A greater challenge awaited: the rise of new money. New economic titans began to emerge. Industrial families like the Carnegies, Rockefellers, Morgans, Vanderbilts, Krupps. Unlike the Rothschilds, they didn't earn their wealth from finance alone. They controlled steel, oil, railroads, and manufacturing, the foundations of the modern world. Their industries reshaped economies faster than bond markets could. In America, J.P. Morgan became the financial giant the government depended on. In Germany, Deutsche Bank rose. In France, Credit Lyonnais. In Britain, Barings expanded. The Rothschilds suddenly had rivals in every direction. Throughout the 1800s, they had been the financial arteries of Europe. But the 1900s brought new organs, new systems, new players, and the balance shifted. Then came the event that struck at the core of their identity: World War I. War wasn't new to the Rothschilds. They had financed conflicts before. But this war was different. It wasn't kings fighting over territory. It was entire nations mobilizing millions of soldiers, consuming resources faster than capital families could handle. Governments printed money. National banks seized emergency powers. Entire economies were converted into war machines. The Rothschilds still participated, but their influence was overshadowed by state intervention and industrial-scale financing. Even worse, 4 of the 5 Rothschild branches were located in countries now at war with each other. London Rothschilds, Paris Rothschilds, Vienna Rothschilds, Naples Rothschilds, Frankfurt Rothschilds. For a family whose entire empire relied on unity, coordination, and cross-border movement, the war tore apart the very foundations of their network. Communication was delayed. Transactions were restricted. Governments distrusted foreign capital. Even the legendary Rothschild intelligence system couldn't overcome the chaos. Then came the most devastating blow, one that had nothing to do with profit or policy: anti-Semitic nationalism. Throughout Europe, extremist movements portrayed Jewish financiers as enemies of the nation, regardless of the Rothschilds' contributions to economic stability. In Austria and Germany, as nationalism surged, the Rothschilds were pushed out of political influence and public trust. Their Frankfurt branch, the birthplace of the entire dynasty, was eventually crushed during the Nazi period. Assets were seized, properties confiscated, records destroyed, generations of work obliterated in a single decade. This wasn't decline, this was dismantling. And yet, the conspiracy theories skyrocketed. As their actual influence waned, the mythology surrounding them grew, the strange paradox of power. When they were at their peak in the 1800s, the public barely spoke of them. They operated in silence, precision, and discretion. But when the world descended into chaos in the early 20th century, their name became a lightning rod for paranoia. They weren't controlling the world, they were being blamed for it. But ironically, the very myths about their power helped preserve their legacy. The truth? Their wealth was still immense, but it was no longer world-changing. Their empire fractured into national branches, each following its own path. London became the strongest. Paris remained influential, but focused more on investment. Vienna died out. Naples dissolved. Frankfurt was destroyed. They were no longer a single empire, just a family of wealthy banking houses. The 5 arrows were now 5 separate stories. The modern Rothschilds still own vineyards, investment firms, merchant banks, mining stakes, and philanthropic institutions. But their influence is incomparable to their 19th century peak. They are powerful, but no more than other billionaire families. No more than large investment groups. No more than major corporations. Their wealth today is spread across dozens of heirs and diversified assets. So why do the legends persist? Because the truth is harder to accept than the myth. People want to believe in a puppet master controlling global events. It's more comforting than facing the chaos of economics, politics, and human ambition. The Rothschilds became symbols not of actual power, but of imagined power. Yet, their real legacy is much more fascinating. They helped shape the modern bond market. They pioneered fast international finance. They advanced global communication networks. They supported scientific research, Jewish emancipation, and philanthropy. They funded infrastructure that fuels today's world. But the greatest lesson the Rothschilds left behind is this: power built quietly lasts longer than power built loudly. But even quiet empires eventually bend to the evolution of history. Their story is not of domination, but adaptation. Not of conspiracy, but innovation. Not of hidden control, but of financial architecture. An empire that began in a tiny ghetto rose to the height of world finance and faded into a constellation of modern institutions, still influential, but no longer untouchable. The Rothschild dynasty proves one thing: wealth can build nations, rescue empires, and reshape the world. But history always moves faster than the families who try to master it. And in the shadows of that history, the legacy of the richest family the world has ever known still lingers, whispering through banks, industries, and the financial systems they helped create.